Captain John Miller stood at the viewport of Earth's orbital station, gazing at the massive alien vessel that had appeared 3 days ago. The ship's metallic surface shimmered like liquid mercury against the blackness of space. After centuries of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they finally had their answer. "They're requesting permission to dock again, sir," said Lieutenant Garcia, monitoring communications at his station. Miller nodded. "Tell them we're ready to receive their delegation." The Xenovian ship had arrived without warning, materializing just beyond lunar orbit. Their first transmission had been simple. "Greetings, Earth. We come as representatives of the Galactic Council. We wish to establish diplomatic relations." In the 3 days since, Earth's governments had scrambled to prepare a unified response. Miller, as commander of the orbital station and highest-ranking military officer in space, had been appointed head of the first contact team. Dr. Olivia Wright adjusted her uniform beside him. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had spent her career theorizing about alien life. Now she would meet it face to face. "Do you think they're truly peaceful?" she asked quietly. Miller kept his expression neutral. "I hope so. But hope isn't a strategy." The docking bay doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. 6 Xenovians entered, walking with fluid grace. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with slender bodies covered in pale blue scales that seemed to shift color slightly as they moved. Their 4-fingered hands ended in short claws, and their large eyes contained vertical pupils. The lead Xenovian stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Zorthak of the Galactic Council. We bring greetings and an offer of membership to your species." Miller bowed slightly. "Captain John Miller, representing Earth. This is Dr. Olivia Wright, our chief scientist." The meeting proceeded to a conference room, where Earth officials waited via video link. President Clark's face filled the main screen, flanked by other world leaders. "We are honored by your visit," the president said. "Humanity has long wondered about life beyond our world." Zorthak's expression was difficult to read, but something in his manner seemed condescending to Miller. "Your species has progressed remarkably quickly. We have been monitoring your development for some time," the alien said. "The Council oversees peaceful relations between civilized worlds. We believe Earth may be ready to join our community." Dr. Wright leaned forward. "What would membership entail?" "Protection, trade, knowledge. But there are conditions." Zorthak placed a device on the table that projected a holographic document. "Certain technologies must be restricted. Weapons development must cease. Council representatives must be stationed on your world." Miller noticed Sam Daniels, his security chief, frowning at the far end of the table. Later, after the Xenovians returned to their ship, Daniels approached Miller privately. "Sir, something's off. During the meeting, I detected energy signatures consistent with scanning technology. They were mapping our station." Miller's eyes narrowed. "What else?" "The translation seemed too perfect, as if they've studied our languages extensively." Over the next week, the Xenovians established a diplomatic compound in orbit. Earth leaders, excited by the prospect of advanced technology, rushed toward preliminary agreements. But strange incidents began occurring. An Earth research outpost on Mars reported equipment failure. Communications with lunar bases experienced unexplained interruptions. Dr. Wright discovered biological samples missing from her lab. "They're accessing our systems somehow," she told Miller. Then Daniels made the most disturbing discovery: tiny devices embedded throughout the station, surveillance technology far beyond human capability. When Miller confronted Zorthak, the ambassador smiled thinly. "Captain, surely you understand that the Council must assess potential members thoroughly. Your species has a violent history." That night, Miller received an encrypted message from Earth Defense Command. Similar devices had been found in military installations worldwide. As Miller stared at the Xenovian ship through his viewport, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't first contact. It was first reconnaissance. The treaty negotiations with the Xenovians continued for 6 weeks. Earth's governments, eager to join the Galactic Council, agreed to preliminary terms while Miller and his team conducted their own quiet investigation. Lieutenant Lisa Reyes, the station's communications expert, had been monitoring the Xenovian transmissions. She called Miller to her workstation in the middle of the night shift. "Captain, I've managed to partially decrypt some of their internal communications," she said, her voice low even though they were alone. "They're using a frequency that bounces between subspace bands." Miller leaned over her shoulder, studying the fragments of alien text. "Can you translate it?" "Only pieces, but what I can understand doesn't match what they've been telling us." Rice pointed to a section of code. "This refers to Earth as acquisition target, and mentions something called Resource Extraction Protocol." The next morning, Miller shared the findings with Dr. Wright and Daniels in his private quarters, away from possible Xenovian listening devices. "I've noticed their scientists seem particularly interested in our water reserves and mineral deposits," Wright said. "They ask questions that go beyond cultural exchange." Daniels nodded grimly. "And their so-called diplomatic vessel has weapon mounts hidden under those decorative hull plates. I got a scan when they repositioned last week." Before they could discuss further, alarms blared across the station. Miller rushed to the command center. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Mars colony," the communications officer reported. "Europa base also went dark 10 minutes ago." Miller felt a cold sensation spread through his chest. "Get me Earth Command immediately." The screen remained dark for several seconds before Admiral Kate Bennett's face appeared. Her expression confirmed Miller's worst fears. "Captain, we've detected multiple Xenovian vessels entering our solar system. They're not responding to hails." She lowered her voice. "The Defense Council just received a message from the Galactic Council. They claim we violated the preliminary treaty by concealing military capabilities." "That's absurd," Miller protested. "We've been completely transparent." "I know. Mobilize your security teams and prepare for possible hostile action. I'm activating our contingency fleet." Bennett's image flickered. "They don't know about our South Pacific facility, Orthe." Her transmission cut off abruptly. Miller turned to see Zorthak standing in the doorway, flanked by 4 Xenovian soldiers. "Captain Miller, I'm afraid Earth has been deemed unsuitable for membership," the ambassador said smoothly. "The Council has classified your species as primitive and dangerous, requiring containment." "Containment?" Miller stepped forward, but stopped when the Xenovians raised their weapons. "A standard procedure for species that pose potential threats to galactic stability." Zorthak's expression remained calm. "Your weapons technology is advancing too rapidly. Your resources, however, will benefit more deserving civilizations." Outside the viewport, a flash of light illuminated space. Miller watched in horror as Earth's main defense station erupted into pieces, debris scattering across orbit. Thousands of lives extinguished in seconds. "Your resistance will only make this process more difficult," Zorthak continued. "The Council has contained dozens of aggressive species. Earth is nothing special." What happened next occurred too quickly for the Xenovians to react. Daniels, who had entered silently behind them, activated an electromagnetic pulse device. The Xenovian weapons sputtered and died. Miller and his security team overpowered the aliens while Reyes locked down the command center. "Get everyone to the emergency shuttles," Miller ordered. "We have contingency protocols." As Earth forces scattered across the solar system, more Xenovian warships emerged from hyperspace. The orbital station shuddered under the first barrage of enemy fire. Dr. Wright approached Miller as they hurried toward the escape pods. "They'd done this before to other species, haven't they? This wasn't about membership, it was about conquest all along." Miller nodded grimly. "And they have no idea what they've just started." Commander Alan Hayes wiped sweat from his brow as he studied the tactical display inside the asteroid base. 2 months had passed since the Xenovian attack, and Earth's military forces were scattered across the solar system. This hidden facility, carved into a large asteroid in the outer belt, had become one of humanity's last command centers. Status report on the Jupiter sector, Hayes ordered. His second-in-command, Major Frank Wilson, brought up the latest intelligence. Council ships have established a blockade around Ganymede. They're stripping the moon for resources. Our cells on Callista remain undetected for now. Earth had prepared for disasters before: asteroid impacts, nuclear war, climate catastrophes, but never alien invasion. Yet some military planners had created contingencies even for this scenario. Hidden bases, backup communication systems, and emergency protocols had allowed humanity to maintain a resistance despite being overwhelmed by superior technology. A technician called out from across the command room. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Titan Base. It's encrypted with yesterday's codes." Hayes moved quickly to the communication station. Governor Patricia Douglas's face appeared on screen, her expression grim but determined. "Commander, our refugee situation is stable for now. We've managed to conceal our thermal signatures beneath the methane lakes. The Xenovians have made 3 passes over our region, but haven't detected us." "Good work, Governor. How are your supplies holding?" "We can last another 3 months. Dr. Martinez has made progress with the council tech we salvage." Hayes nodded. Dr. Sofia Martinez had been Earth's leading quantum physicist before the invasion. Now she led a team working to understand and reverse engineer Xenovian technology from captured equipment. "Put her on," Hayes said. The screen shifted to show Martinez's face, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept in days. "Commander, we've cracked their communication protocols," she said without preamble. "We can now intercept council transmissions across the system. And what we're hearing is illuminating." "Tell me." "Earth isn't the first. The Council has been systematically containing species they consider threats or those with valuable resources. At least 12 other civilizations have been subjugated in the past century alone." Hayes felt a mixture of anger and vindication. So they were never planning to welcome us into their council. "No, but there's more. Captain Miller and Dr. Wright are alive." Hayes straightened. "Where?" "They were captured during the initial attack, but escaped from a council prison ship near Saturn. They're trying to reach Titan with crucial intelligence about council weaknesses." This was the first piece of good news in weeks. Hayes turned to Wilson. "Prepare a stealth craft to retrieve them." Later that day, Hayes inspected their limited fleet hidden in the asteroid's massive central hangar. Engineers worked around the clock, modifying Earth vessels with reverse-engineered council technology. What they lacked in resources, they made up for in ingenuity. Lieutenant Cole, head of weapons development, demonstrated their latest achievement. "We've adapted their shield technology to our fighter crafts. It's not as powerful as theirs, but it should give us some protection against their energy weapons." "How many ships can we equip?" Hayes asked. 10 now, maybe 30 by next week. But there's something else you should see." Cole led Hayes to a sealed section where a captured Xenovian scout vessel was being dismantled. Technicians had removed panels to expose the propulsion system. "We've figured out how their faster-than-light drive works," Cole explained. "And we found a way to modify it, so it doesn't leave the quantum signature their sensors detect. If we succeed, we can move through space undetected." Hayes stared at the alien technology, a plan forming in his mind. Earth couldn't win a direct confrontation with the Council's massive fleets, but a hidden force striking from the shadows, appearing and disappearing at will, that might just give humanity a fighting chance. "Make it your top priority," he ordered, "and prepare a secure channel to all human outposts. It's time we coordinated our counterattack." Commander Ryan Foster crouched behind the rocky outcropping on Enceladus, Saturn's icy moon. Through his tactical visor, he watched Council supply ships landing at their newly established base. 6 months into the occupation, the Xenovians had spread their forces throughout the solar system, harvesting resources and building processing facilities. "Team in position," whispered Sergeant Amy Bell through the comlink. Her squad had circled around to the facility's power generators. "Begin countdown. Foster replied. Remember, we need those data cores intact. This was Foster's fifth raid on Council facilities. Each mission followed the same pattern. Strike fast, grab intelligence and technology, then vanish before reinforcements arrived. Earth's resistance had grown more organized since Captain Miller and Dr. Wright had returned with critical information about Council operations. Miller had discovered something crucial during his captivity. Earth wasn't fighting alone. Other species had suffered similar fates, and some were actively rebelling against Council rule. Charges set, Bell confirmed. Detonation in 30 seconds. Foster signaled his assault team forward. The moment the explosions disrupted the base's shield grid, they would have exactly 4 minutes to complete their objective before Council battlecruisers responded. The generators erupted in coordinated blasts. Alarms wailed as Foster's team breached the facility. They moved efficiently through corridors, neutralizing Xenovian security forces with electromagnetic pulse weapons developed by Dr. Martinez. In the central data hub, Foster found what they had come for, a quantum relay node connecting this facility to the Council's broader communication network. Specialist Grant began the download while Foster stood guard. "Sir," Grant said, eyes wide as he studied the incoming data, "there's a transmission about a meeting. Some kind of alliance gathering on Viridian Prime." Foster's pulse quickened. The Viridians were one of the species Miller had mentioned, reptilian beings whose homeworld had been contained decades earlier. They had maintained an underground resistance ever since. "Download everything," Foster ordered. 3 days later, aboard the Earth vessel Defiance, Foster watched as Captain Miller addressed the assembled resistance leadership. The Defiance was humanity's first ship equipped with the modified Phantom drive that could evade Council detection. "The intel Commander Foster recovered confirms what we suspected," Miller explained. "We're not alone in this fight. The Viridians have called for a meeting of all species resisting Council rule." Dr. Wright stood beside a holographic display showing a distant star system. "The Viridians have maintained a hidden base here for 20 years. They've invited representatives from Earth to attend their Alliance summit." Admiral Bennett, now commanding Earth's scattered defense forces from the Titan base, nodded thoughtfully. "It's a risk, but one worth taking." "Who will go?" "I will." Miller volunteered immediately, along with Dr. Wright and Commander Foster. His team proved they can handle Council security measures. 2 weeks later, Foster stood aboard the Defiance as it emerged from Phantom Drive, near Viridian Prime. The planet looked scorched from orbit, its once lush surface reduced to desert by Council mining operations. Their small delegation was escorted to an underground city by Viridian scouts. Foster was struck by the diversity of beings gathered in the vast cavern. Besides the tall, scaled Viridians, he recognized the crystalline Corellians, whose telepathic abilities had helped them resist Council mind-scanning technology. Viridian Prime Speaker Teshkor, his scales bearing the scars of many battles, greeted the humans warmly. "For decades we fought alone, each species believing they were the Council's only victims. Now we know better." The Prime Speaker led them to a chamber where representatives from 7 species had gathered. On display were Council ships disabled by various technologies each resistance had developed. "The Corellians have created counter-surveillance measures that block Council sensors," Teshkor explained. "The Drith developed weapons that target Council shield frequencies, and now humans bring this Phantom drive technology." Miller stepped forward. "Separately, we struggle to survive. Together, we might do more than just resist. We might win." As Foster looked around the chamber, he felt something he hadn't experienced since the invasion began. Hope. The Council's greatest advantage had always been their unity. Now, for the first time, they would face a united opposition. Dr. William Chen worked tirelessly in the underground laboratory on the dark side of the moon. For nearly a year, Earth had been building its forces in secret, forming alliances with other species oppressed by the Galactic Council. Now, the final phase of humanity's counter-strategy was taking shape. "Run the simulation again," Chen ordered his team of scientists. The holographic display showed a Council warship, then flashed as the simulation applied their new weapons effects. The ship's systems went dark sector by sector. Quantum destabilizer functioning at 93% efficiency, reported his assistant. That's 7% better than yesterday. Chen allowed himself a small smile. The Nemesis Protocol, Earth's secret weapons program, had progressed faster than anyone had expected. The quantum destabilizer represented its crowning achievement, technology that could disable Council ships without destroying them, by temporarily destabilizing the quantum field that powered their systems. In another section of the lunar facility, Admiral Kate Bennett inspected the fleet that Earth had been building in secret. Dark, angular ships lined the massive underground hangar, their hulls incorporating materials and technologies from all 7 species in the Alliance. "How many vessels are ready?" Bennett asked the shipyard commander. 57 combat-ready ships with full Phantom drive capabilities. Another 32 will be operational within 2 weeks. Bennett nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. When the Council first attacked, humanity had been outmatched in every way. Now they had a fighting chance. A communications officer approached urgently. "Admiral, we're receiving an encrypted transmission from Captain Miller on Viridian Prime." On screen, Miller's face appeared, looking tired but determined. "Admiral, the Alliance Command has approved Operation Hornet's Nest. All species are committing their forces." "Understood, Captain. Earth is ready to play its part." 3 days later, in the Council's regional headquarters on Pluto's moon Charon, the Xenovian commander Drelvox received alarming reports. "Counselor, we've detected unusual activity in the asteroid belt," his sensor officer reported. "Insurgents?" Drelvox asked dismissively. The human resistance had been a minor nuisance, their attacks limited to small raids and sabotage. "Unclear, sir. The readings suggest multiple ships, but they're flickering. Our sensors can't maintain a lock." Drelvox frowned. "Deploy reconnaissance vessels and alert." He never finished the sentence. The entire base shuddered as alarms blared. Outside the viewports, dozens of ships appeared seemingly from nowhere, their dark hulls absorbing rather than reflecting light. "Human vessels," the sensor officer shouted. "But they're using technology we've never." A pulse of energy washed over the base. Every Council system went dark simultaneously. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as Earth unveiled its hidden arsenal. The Council had never imagined that humans could develop such advanced technology so quickly, or that the scattered resistance cells had been coordinating all along. In Earth orbit, Admiral Bennett directed the main assault from her flagship. "All ships, execute Phase 2 of Operation Hornet's Nest." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. First, lure Council forces into responding to simultaneous attacks. Then, when their reinforcements arrived through predetermined hyperspace routes, unleash the real surprise. As Council battlecruisers emerged from hyperspace near Jupiter, they found themselves surrounded by not just human ships, but vessels from all 7 Alliance species. The quantum destabilizers fired in concert, leaving the Council fleet powerless and drifting. On the Galactic Council's central communications network, every channel suddenly broadcast the same message, delivered by Captain Miller. "Attention, Galactic Council. For too long, you have subjugated species under the guise of containment. You believed Earth would be just another conquest. You were wrong. We have formed an alliance with others you have oppressed, and today we demonstrate that your rule is over." In the Council's central chamber on Hegemony Prime, the ruling members watched in disbelief as reports flooded in. One of the eldest members turned to Ambassador Zorthak, who had first contacted Earth. "You assured us humans were primitive," the elder said coldly. "You said they posed no threat." Zorthak stared at the tactical displays showing Council defeats across multiple systems. They hid their true capabilities. They were never what they appeared to be. The Grand Council chamber on Hegemony Prime buzzed with panic. Representatives from 37 spacefaring civilizations argued loudly as emergency reports continued to flood in. The massive holographic display at the chamber center showed Council military assets blinking out across dozens of star systems. "This is unprecedented," shouted Councillor Mrath of the Petrosian Confederacy. His crystalline form shimmered with agitation. How could primitive species coordinate such a massive offensive? High Councillor Vaz, the eldest of the ruling members, slammed a gnarled appendage against the table. "We must respond with overwhelming force. Deploy the enforcement armada from the Central Fleet." Before any orders could be issued, the Chamber's communication system activated without authorization. Every screen and holographic projector displayed the same image. Captain John Miller, flanked by representatives of the 7 Alliance species. "Members of the Galactic Council," Miller began, his voice calm but firm. "For too long, you have operated under the pretense of galactic unity while subjugating lesser species. Today, that ends." The feed switched to documentation of Council atrocities, forced labor camps on Viridian mining worlds, biological experimentation on Corellian populations, the orbital bombardment of Earth's lunar colonies. "These records were recovered from your own secure databases," Miller continued. "They are now being broadcast on all frequencies across every civilized world. On thousands of planets, beings of all species were seeing the truth of Council rule for the first time. The carefully maintained illusion of benevolent governance was shattering." Back in the Council chamber, several representatives rose in outrage. "This is manipulation," cried Ambassador Zorthak. "These insurgents have doctored our records." The representative from Mortelia, a gas giant species that had always been loyal to Council leadership, moved away from the central table. "These records match our own intelligence reports. Reports you assured us were false." One by one, representatives began questioning the Council leadership. Species that had been told they were alone in their concerns now realized they had been systematically deceived. In orbit around Hegemony Prime, the Council's defensive fleet was in disarray. Alliance ships had seized control of key hyperspace junction points, preventing reinforcements from arriving. The quantum destabilizer technology had proven devastatingly effective against standard Council defenses. Admiral Bennett coordinated the Alliance fleet movements from her command ship near the system's edge. "All units maintain position. We're not here to destroy their civilization, only to end their oppression." On the Council homeworld below, mass protests erupted as citizens learned the truth about their government's actions. Many had genuinely believed in the Council's mission of peaceful unification and were horrified by the evidence of systematic subjugation. Meanwhile, in a desperate move, Zorthak and a faction of hardline Xenovians attempted to seize control of the Council's emergency protocols. Their plan was to activate the Doomsday Defense Grid, which would destroy the hyperspace lanes themselves rather than allow the Alliance to use them. "The Council has ruled for 10,000 years, Zorthak declared to his co-conspirators. "We will not be overthrown by primitives." They nearly succeeded, but were stopped by an unexpected source: other Council members who refused to participate in such a destructive act. The Xenovian coup failed when Councillor Traz of the Bentheri Republic blocked their access to the defense grid controls. 3 days later, Captain Miller stood in the same Council chamber where the Xenovians had once planned Earth's subjugation. Now he addressed a very different gathering: representatives from both the Alliance and former Council worlds who sought reform. "We did not fight to establish our own dominance," Miller explained as the chamber quieted. "We fought to end oppression. Now we must build something better together." Dr. Wright presented evidence of the Council's systematic corruption, how certain species had manipulated governance to extract resources from others, how military forces meant for protection had been used for conquest. "The old Council claimed to represent galactic civilization," Miller concluded, "but they feared true cooperation between equals. That fear led them to see threats where there were only potential allies. Their mistake with Earth wasn't underestimating our technology. It was underestimating our capacity to form bonds with others. As Miller spoke, Alliance ships throughout Council space continued freeing subjugated worlds. The Council's defensive perimeter had collapsed completely as more species joined the revolution. The massive fleet of Alliance ships filled the space around Hegemony Prime. Earth vessels, once hidden in asteroid bases and beneath gas giant clouds, now proudly displayed their markings alongside ships from the 6 other founding species of the Resistance. Admiral Kate Bennett stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as the final phase of their plan unfolded. All attack groups report ready, Admiral, her tactical officer announced. Bennett nodded. Begin the approach. Remember our objective. Minimal casualties, maximum impact. The Council's remaining defensive platforms activated as the Alliance fleet entered their range. Energy weapons flared across space, but the ships were prepared. Shields based on Viridian technology absorbed the impacts while human-designed quantum destabilizers targeted the platform's power cores. One by one, the defenses went dark without being destroyed. This was deliberate. Earth had insisted that their victory not mirror the Council's destructive methods. On the surface of Hegemony Prime, in the capital city's central plaza, the remaining Council leadership gathered under heavy guard. The Xenovian faction had been completely isolated after their failed coup attempt. Ambassador Zorthak stood rigid as the Alliance landing craft descended. Captain Miller led the ground forces, accompanied by representatives from each Alliance species. Their approach to the Council headquarters was broadcast across thousands of worlds. "You could have destroyed us," High Counselor Vaz said as Miller entered the chamber. The ancient alien's voice sounded tired, confused. "Why didn't you?" "Because that's what you would have done," Miller replied simply. "We're here to build something new, not repeat your mistakes." Dr. Wright activated a holographic display showing the proposed structure for the new Galactic Accord. A system where all spacefaring species would have equal representation, where military power would be balanced by civilian oversight, where technological knowledge would be shared rather than restricted. "Unconditional surrender is our only demand," Miller continued. "The time of the Council's rule is over." After a moment of tense silence, Vaz stepped forward and formally surrendered. The war that had begun with Earth's betrayal ended not with the extinction of their enemies, but with the promise of transformation. In the days that followed, Alliance forces secured key facilities across Hegemony Prime. Council records were opened, revealing centuries of manipulation and conquest disguised as peacekeeping. Species that had been portrayed as dangers to galactic stability were shown to have been targeted primarily for their resources or strategic locations. Dr. Wright led the team establishing a framework for peaceful coexistence. The Council's greatest fear was that different species would truly cooperate as equals, she explained during the first meeting of the provisional government. That fear drove them to keep us divided and suspicious of one another. Admiral Bennett oversaw the dismantling of the Council's military infrastructure. Council warships were placed under joint command, with crews composed of members from multiple species to prevent any single group from controlling too much power. On Earth, celebrations erupted as news of the victory spread. Humanity had not only survived, but had helped forge a new interstellar community. The colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, once devastated by Council attacks, began rebuilding with assistance from Alliance partners. 6 months later, Miller stood in the newly constructed Chamber of Accord, where representatives from over 100 worlds had gathered to sign the founding charter of the new Galactic Alliance. The room buzzed with dozens of languages as former enemies worked together to establish fair trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when the Xenovians first arrived?" Dr. Wright asked, joining Miller by the chamber's great window overlooking the capital city. Miller shook his head. "I expected we'd be fighting for our survival. I never thought we'd end up reshaping the galaxy." "The Council's mistake was seeing difference as threat," Wright observed. "They couldn't understand that diversity could be strength." As the formal signing ceremony began, Miller watched representatives from worlds that had been at war only months before now pledge cooperation. Earth had entered the galactic community not as a conquered world, but as a respected power, not through domination, but through alliance. The Council had sought Earth's submission and found instead their own transformation. Humanity's revenge hadn't been destruction, but something far more powerful, fundamental change.